I remember the night I stopped trusting my own instincts. It wasn't loud. There was no shouting. No slammed doors. I just a long pause on the phone, the kind of pause that tells you everything before a single word does. That pause was the moment I understood, deep in my chest, that I had become someone my son found inconvenient. For months before that call, I'd been feeling it, a tightness behind my ribs that showed up when I climbed the stairs to my apartment, a shortness of breath that made me stop halfway up and pretend I was checking my mailbox. I told myself it was age. I told myself a lot of things. I've always been a stubborn man, the kind who fixes his own gutters at 63 and refuses to admit his knees aren't what they used to be. I raised my son alone after his mother passed when he was 9. Worked 2 jobs at the plant for years so he could play travel baseball and go to a decent college. After his mother, I never once complained about it, because that's what you do for your kid. You give until there's nothing left, and you trust that somewhere down the line, it comes back around. That was the deal I thought I'd made with the universe. Turns out pride doesn't lower your blood pressure, and stubbornness doesn't show up on an EKG. When I finally went to the doctor, I already knew it wasn't going to be good news. You can feel these things in your body long before a machine confirms them. Dr. Alvarez, a calm woman with kind eyes and a way of delivering hard truths gently, sat me down and told me my heart wasn't pumping the way it should. Something called cardiomyopathy. Not a heart attack, not something dramatic, just a slow, steady weakening, like a rope fraying one strand at a time. She said if I didn't start medication immediately, I was looking at heart failure within the year. She wrote the prescription herself and pressed it into my hand like she was handing me a lifeline. "This isn't optional, Mr. Whitfield," she said. "This is what keeps you alive. At it. At it. At it." I sat in my truck in the clinic parking lot for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive home. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The medication was almost $900 a month. My pension from the plant barely covered rent and groceries in my little apartment in Dayton, Ohio. There was no cushion, no savings account with room to breathe. I sat at my kitchen table that night with the prescription in front of me and counted every dollar I had twice, hoping the second count would be different. It wasn't. There was only one person I could think to call. My son, Caleb. I raised that boy with everything I had. Taught him to throw a curveball in the backyard until it was too dark to see the plate. Sat in the bleachers for every game, rain or shine, and walked him through his mother's funeral when he was still young enough that grief looked like confusion on his face. I was there for his wedding, gave the toast that made half the room cry. He is the only family I have left in this world. Calling him felt like lifting something heavier than my body could manage. My thumb hovered over his name in my phone for a long time. I told myself I wasn't going to be a burden, that I'd only ask this once, that I'd pay every cent back. I told myself a lot of things that night. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Dad? Hey, what's up?" His voice was quick, distracted. I could hear music in the background. Laughter that wasn't mine to be part of. "Hey, Caleb, how's everything?" I tried to sound light. My voice cracked anyway. "Good, good, kind of in the middle of something. What's going on?" I told him. I told him about the doctor, about my heart, about the prescription, sitting on my table, that I couldn't afford. I asked if he could help me out this month, just enough to get started. And I actually promised him that I'd pay him back as soon as I could figure something out. There was a silence on the other end that stretched out longer than any silence has a right to. "Dad." His tone shifted, the warmth draining out of it like water from a cracked glass. "Things are really tight for us right now. Between the mortgage and Brianna's car payment, we're stretched thin. I just don't have anything extra." I felt something cave in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart condition. "I only need a little, Caleb. Just enough for this month's supply. I wouldn't ask if I had another way." End quote. I wouldn't ask. "I can't, Dad. I'm sorry. I really can't." His words were flat, final, like he'd rehearsed them. "I've gotta go. We'll figure something out, okay? Love you." And then the line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, holding a phone that had gone silent, listening to nothing, feeling something break loose inside me that I didn't have a name for yet. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just sat down at the table and stared at the prescription until the words blurred. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the conversation, searching for some version of it where I'd misunderstood, where he'd call back in an hour apologizing, explaining he'd panicked. He didn't call back. 2 days passed in a fog. I picked up the prescription from the pharmacy and stood at the counter, watching the pharmacist ring it up, watching the total appear on the screen, and then telling her I'd have to come back for it. I lied to the nurse who called to check on me, told her I'd started the medication already. I was too ashamed to say the truth out loud that my own son wouldn't help keep me alive. On the second night, restless and hollow, I did something I almost never do. I opened Facebook on my old tablet, the one with the cracked corner, just to have something to look at besides the ceiling. And that's when I saw it, a video posted by my son's wife, Brianna. It was a highlight reel, professionally shot, the kind of thing you pay someone to edit with music and slow-motion transitions. A backyard transformed into something out of a magazine, string lights strung across a manicured lawn, a catering table stacked with trays I couldn't begin to price, a live guitarist playing near a fountain that definitely hadn't been there the last time I visited. The caption read, "Celebrating my incredible mother-in-law's 65th birthday in style. Thank you to my amazing husband Caleb for making this dream come true for my mom. She deserves the world." My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. I watched the whole thing with my jaw tight. There was a chocolate fountain. There was a string quartet for part of the evening. The practice. And then, near the end of the video, the moment that stopped my heart cold, Brianna walking up to her mother, Linda, and fastening a diamond bracelet around her wrist while the whole party erupted into applause. Linda pressed her hand to her chest, tears streaming, mouthing the words, "I can't believe this," to the camera. I checked the date on the post. It had gone up the day after I called Caleb begging for medicine money. Later, scrolling through the comments, I found one from a friend of Brianna's joking that the whole party must have cost close to $14,000. Easy. $14,000 for a party. A diamond bracelet for a woman who wasn't even my son's own mother. And a few $100s a month was too much to spare for the man who raised him alone after his mother died. I felt something in me go cold and still, the way a lake freezes over not all at once, but slowly, from the surface down. I finally understood exactly where I stood in my son's life. I wasn't his father anymore, not in any way that mattered to him. I was an obligation, a line item he'd decided he could no longer afford. I turned my phone off that night. I didn't want to see anything else. I didn't want to hear his voice, didn't want an explanation, didn't want to fight. There was nothing left to fight for. The pain in my chest that night wasn't the angina Dr. Alvarez had warned me about. It was something else entirely, a real, physical ache where my heart used to be whole. I sat in the dark of my living room for hours, thinking about my late wife, Diane, and the promise I'd made her in the hospital before she passed. I told her I'd take care of our boy. I told her I'd give him everything. And I had every ounce of energy, every spare dollar, every weekend I could have spent on myself. I thought that was what love looked like. I thought it would matter. I must have drifted into some kind of half-sleep in my chair, because the next thing I remember is a knock at my door. It wasn't loud. It was soft, hesitant, like whoever it was wasn't sure they should be there at all. I ignored it the first time. I didn't have it in me to face anyone. But it came again, a little firmer, and something made me get up, my knees aching, my chest tight, and shuffle toward the door without even checking the peephole. I didn't care who it was anymore. I opened it, ready to send whoever it was away. And then I froze. It wasn't Caleb standing in my hallway. It wasn't a neighbor, and it wasn't the police. It was Linda, Brianna's mother, the woman from the video, the woman who, 2 nights earlier, had cried tears of joy over a diamond bracelet paid for, in part with the money that could have kept my heart beating. She looked nothing like the woman in that video. No jewelry, no makeup. She wore an old gray cardigan, and her eyes were red and swollen, like she'd been crying for hours. But that wasn't what stopped my breath. What stopped my breath was what she was carrying, a small white pharmacy bag in one hand, and tucked under her other arm, pressed against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her upright, a thick manila envelope. Neither of us said anything at first. We just stood there, looking at each other across the threshold of my apartment, me, a broken man in a doorway, and her, the woman I'd spent 2 days silently resenting. Her chin trembled. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to talk to you. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. My legs felt like they might give out. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. She stepped closer, studying my face, and whatever she saw there seemed to hollow her out even further. Can I come in, please? I nodded because I didn't trust my voice, and I stepped aside. She walked past me into my small living room, her footsteps quiet on the worn carpet. I closed the door behind her, and the click of the lock felt too loud in the silence. We sat down, me in my recliner, her perched on the edge of my couch, the envelope clutched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The pharmacy bag sat between us on the coffee table like something neither of us wanted to acknowledge yet. She took a breath, and then she started to talk. I saw you, she said, in the video Brianna posted. Not the party. I saw your face in a comment someone tagged you in. From before. And then, I started asking questions. Something about the way people were talking about you didn't sit right with me. I felt my jaw tighten. Even hearing it, secondhand hurt. I confronted Caleb, she continued. I asked him why you looked so devastated in that old photo, why nobody had mentioned you in weeks. He didn't want to tell me at first, but I pushed, and eventually he told me everything. About your heart, about the medication, about the phone call. Her voice cracked. He told me you asked for help, and he said no. And then God, I'm so sorry, he laughed about it. Told me you were probably exaggerating, trying to guilt him. Brianna laughed too. I closed my eyes. Hearing it out loud was worse than I expected. I was horrified, Linda said, tears slipping down her face now. I sat at that party with a diamond bracelet on my wrist that they'd spent thousands of dollars on, and the whole time, you were sitting somewhere alone, sick, and they knew and didn't care. I couldn't finish my cake. I told them I had a headache and left early. She looked down at the pharmacy bag. I stopped by your pharmacy on my way here. I explained who I was, and they let me pick up your prescription. I paid for it myself. My throat closed up. A woman I barely knew had done what my own son wouldn't. Thank you, I managed. But why? Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. She shook her head, more tears falling freely now. You're not nobody. You're a human being. And what my family did to you is monstrous. I haven't slept in 2 days. I family.k. I can't look at Caleb or Brianna without feeling sick. She glanced down at the envelope in her lap like she was gathering courage. This, she said, lifting it slightly, this is the rest of it. What do you mean? She opened the flap and pulled out a thick stack of bills. I'd been saving this money to give to Caleb and Brianna. A thank you, for the party, for everything they've done for me since my husband passed. Her voice hardened. But I'm not giving it to them. Not after this. There's $11,000 here, Mr. Whitfield. It won't undo what happened. It won't fix your heart on its own. But it can pay for your medication for a long time, and maybe it can buy you some peace. I shook my head, my hands trembling. I can't take this. This is your money. You saved this. Please, she said, pushing the envelope and the pharmacy bag toward me across the table. Let me do this. It's the only way I know how to live with myself right now. N5 man. 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 5 man. N5 man. N5 man. N5 man. N5 man. N5 man. I looked at the money. It wasn't just cash sitting on my coffee table. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. That what happened to me actually mattered to someone. I don't understand, I said quietly. And why didn't Caleb just tell me the truth instead of letting me find out like this? Linda's face fell. Because he's ashamed, I think. Or maybe he's just changed. Brianna has a way of making people forget who they used to be. End quote. I love my daughter, but she's become someone I don't always recognize. And I think somewhere along the way she pulled your son along with her. She reached over and gently pushed the pharmacy bag closer to me. None of that is an excuse, but it might be an explanation. Genter. We sat in silence for a while after that. Eventually, I picked up the pharmacy bag with hands that wouldn't quite stop shaking. Inside, my name was printed neatly on the label, my prescription finally, actually in my possession. I took the first pill right there at my kitchen table, in front of a stranger who had somehow become the closest thing to family I had in that moment. Linda stood to leave not long after. I have to go home, she said. They're probably wondering where I am. What are you going to do now? I asked. 8. She paused at the door, and something steady settled into her expression, something that hadn't been there when she walked in. I'm going to go home and tell my son exactly what I think of him, and then I'm going to tell your son the same. They need to understand that what they did has consequences. And if they don't like it, they can be angry with me. I'd rather be alone with a clear conscience than comfortable with a guilty one. She opened the door, then turned back one more time. Take care of yourself, Mr. Whitfield. You deserve so much better than what you've been given. And then she was gone, back out into the hallway, leaving me alone with a paper bag, an envelope of cash, and a strange, fragile feeling I hadn't felt in days. Something close to hope. And I didn't sleep well that night either, but for the first time in a week, it wasn't dread keeping me awake. The fallout started the next day. Linda kept her word. She went home and told Caleb and Brianna exactly what she'd done, that she'd bought my medication, that she'd given me the money she'd saved for them, that she knew everything about the phone call and the laughing. Caleb called me that evening, furious, accusing me of manipulating his mother-in-law, of guilt-tripping an old woman out of her savings. I let him talk until he ran out of words. I didn't ask her for anything. I told him, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. Pop, you turned me away when I was scared for my life, Caleb. A woman who barely knows me saved it instead. Sit with that. He didn't have a response. He hung up. In the weeks that followed, I heard through mutual friends that things had unraveled fast in that house. Brianna was humiliated once people started asking questions about the party, about where the money for it had really come from, about why her own mother had walked out on her family. Linda moved into a small apartment across town, said she couldn't keep living under the same roof as people who value jewelry over a man's life. The story got around their circle of friends, the way these things do, and the version of events people had once admired. The doting daughter-in-law throwing her mother-in-law a dream party flipped entirely once the truth came out. Financial records don't lie. Pharmacy records don't lie. People stopped seeing Brianna as generous and started seeing her for what she'd actually done. Claying. NHBA. Caleb showed up at my door about 2 months later. He looked thinner, tired, like something in him had cracked open. He apologized, said he'd been under pressure from Brianna, said he didn't know how to say no to her, said he was sorry over and over in a way that might have moved me once. I listened to all of it, and when he was finished, I felt nothing shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not anger, just a quiet, settled emptiness, where my love for him used to sit. And, I'm glad you're sorry, I told him, but I'm alive because of a woman who owed me nothing, not because of you. I told him I didn't need his apology, that I was healing, that my heart, the medical kind and the other kind, was mending in its own time, without him. He cried. And it's theft, that is. He asked for another chance. I told him some things break in a way that can't be put back together. Not completely, not the way they were. He left, and I haven't heard much from him since. Linda and I still talk most weeks now. It's nothing romantic, nothing anyone would put a label on, just two people who got left behind by the same family, learning how to build something steadier out of the wreckage. My cardiologist tells me the medication is working, that my heart function has stabilized, that I likely have years ahead of me that I once thought I'd already lost. Caleb lives with the consequences of what he chose that night on the phone. His marriage to Brianna has been strained ever since the truth came out. From what I understand, he blames her for pushing him toward the choice he made, and she blames him for not being firmer about hiding it. I don't wish either of them harm. I've simply stopped wishing them anything at all. I think back often to that knock on my door, to the sight of a woman I barely knew standing in my hallway, holding a paper bag and an envelope, carrying more compassion for a stranger than my own blood could manage for me. It's strange how life works that way. The people you pour your whole life into can still walk away when it costs them something. And the people who owe you nothing can end up being the ones who show up at your door in the middle of the night carrying your survival in their hands. I've learned that family isn't only the people who share your blood. It's the people who show up. It's the people who care enough to knock on a stranger's door at midnight because their conscience wouldn't let them do otherwise. I'm alive today because a woman I barely knew decided that doing right mattered more than staying comfortable, and I don't think I'll ever stop being grateful for that.